Hello everyone, and welcome to the May 2019 update of the Power BI desktop. As always, we have lots of exciting features this month, and we're going to start with the reporting features. First on our list is the Performance Analyzer pane, and this is a pane geared towards giving you a behind-the-scenes look at what needs to happen to render a visual when, say, you load a page, or you change a filter state, or anything that's going to require the visual to reload, so that you can analyze the performance impact that your report has and try to find ways to optimize it to give your end users a better experience. So you'll be able to find this pane under the View tab alongside all the other panes, and whenever you open it, the first thing you need to do is to start recording. And then from here, anytime you take an action, say cross highlight or change a filter state, all of the queries that are being run to make that happen are recorded in this pane for you to explore. You can also clear it if you have too much and you can't explore it all. You can also clear it, and if you want to get a simulation of actually loading the whole page, you can click this refresh visuals option, which will basically run all the queries for everything across the entire report. And then the last way to get stuff to show in this pane is that if you're really interested in one specific visual, while you have this pane open, there's a new icon in the visual header that will allow you to refresh that specific visual and see the information for that one visual showing up in this pane. And so basically, anytime you do any of these actions, you're going to get a list of all the different activities for each of the individual visuals that are happening. And right away you'll see the overall duration in milliseconds in the pane, and then you can open any of the visuals. Let's take this matrix visual, for example, and you can see the breakdown on where all the time was spent. So for example, I can see the DAX query took 35 milliseconds to display the visual. It took 680 milliseconds, and then there's a last bucket, which is the other bucket. If you're curious about details about what each of these different classifications means, there is a helpful tooltip that you'll see on Hover that will explain it. The first two are fairly obvious. The DAX queries, of course, is the time that it takes us to send the query, to get the data, and get the results back. The visual display is also fairly obvious. It's the time it takes for the visual to render. And this can include things like if it's a map geocoding the data, or if you are displaying, say, images in your table, the time it takes us to go and pull those images from the web and display them would count in this as well. And the other bucket, that's the really interesting one, in that there's a lot of different stuff that can contribute to this. This is basically everything that's left over that after we've run the DAX and the time it's spent to visually display the visual. Things that this can include is some processing stuff behind the scenes, or the time it takes while a visual is sitting in a queue waiting to be rendered. So some things that can make this other bucket larger is, say, just having a bunch of visuals on the page. So if you have a ton of visuals, it makes sense that things are going to have to sit in a queue longer, just because there's just sheer numbers more of them. So if you have a ton of visuals on your page, you may see the other grow quite large, or if you have a bunch of slicers, instead of using our filter pane, you put slicers on the page. The more slicers you have, those are treated as visuals, so they do take time. You also see things in this pane like buttons or shapes, text boxes, even all those things, even if they aren't quote-unquote visuals in terms of what you imagine a visual to be, they do take time spent to show them on the page, and so those are also part of that queue and show up in this pane. Two other things you can do with this pane. For an individual visual, you can actually copy the query that we're sending, and you can if you paste it into, say, Notepad or a editor of some form, you'll be able to actually see the DAX query that we're running. And this could be very useful, say, if you need to do some kind of optimizations to your DAX to make this query more performant. This is a good way to kind of see what's happening behind the scenes. And the other thing you can do is this export option. This will export all of the information for the entire pane into a file, and it actually shows even more information than you're seeing here. So some of these different categories gets broken down further. There's a whole lot more information to explore in this file if you do need to take that additional step and dive a little bit deeper. So if you have a report that takes quite a bit of time to load and you're curious about what's happening, make sure to try out this performance analyzer pane and see what the issues could be. And if there's anything you'd like else to see within this pane, do let us know. We do want to continue to improve the pane and add more features to it. So let us know what you think. Next up are some improvements to our Filter Pane preview. The first one is a much requested feature of being able to sort the filter cards, so you can do that now. And we also support theming for the new Filter Pane as well. Flipping over to my report, if I open up the new Filter Pane, you'll see that I can now drag and drop within the different sections of the Filter Pane to reorder however I want. And if I was to, say, drag a new field onto here as well, I can drop it wherever I want within the list. If you ever want to easily get back to the alphabetical order, we also have this More Options menu now for each section of the pane. And when you click on it, you can sort the cards A to Z and Z to A for easy sorting that way. The other feature was theming support. Now, as part of the JSON file, you can actually format all of the properties that you have in the formatting pane. So, Essbase Pane is where you'll put the properties for the pane itself, like the background and foreground color, the border line on the left, all of that stuff you put in the Essbase Pane section in the JSON file. And under Filter Card is where you're going to put all of the filter card related formatting features. And you can actually format both the applied and the available states for that pane. And you'll put these categories in the third tier down of the visual style section of the JSON file. And if you reference the blog, I do have a snippet of JSON available for you to try out to test out the new formatting capabilities. And just to show that it works, I'm going to really quickly import that theme. So if I go and import that theme, ignoring how the rest of the report looks, you can see that the filter pane has been formatted to what I had put in that JSON file. We also have an accessibility improvement this month. Recently, we added the ability to be able to navigate around most visuals with just a keyboard and a screen reader. But one of the gaps we did have was that the table and matrix still didn't support this keyboard navigation. We're finally closing that gap. So if you're on, say, your focus is, say, on a matrix, you can hit the Control right arrow key to move your focus into the visual, and then you can use your arrow keys to move around, and you can use space or enter to, say, select a data point to cross highlight. And as you're navigating around, of course, the screen reader will read out the relevant information to you as well. And then you can hit the escape key to move your focus back to the visual as a whole, and then continue tabbing around your report. We also have two small formatting features this month. The first is an improvement that lets you control the position of the data labels for your lines. So one complaint we have heard before is that on a line chart, especially whenever you have lines that are near each other, or say a combo chart where the bars and the lines are near each other, it can be a little difficult to tell which data label goes with which line. And so we've added a new way to help to differentiate between them, which is now you have the ability to say, I specifically want all the labels for this one line to be above or below. So if I open my data labels card, I can, of course, set the position from auto to above or under for all the lines in my chart, or I could use the customize series options and say for my average of INSAT, which is the blue line, I want the position of those labels to be above the line, and then for my average of perch again, which is the purple line, I want those to be below the line. And that just helps clean up the data labels a little bit for these lines which are very close together, to make it just a little bit clearer which line and data point go together. And these formatting capabilities are, of course, also available on lines in combo charts as well. And the last reporting feature this month is a very small but much requested formatting capability for our KPI visual, which is control over the indicator text size. So all of these numbers at the top are our KPI visual, and up until now, you have not been able to actually adjust the font size of this indicator number. So, and it's always been 45, which can be quite large if you want to use it, say, the way I have in this report. And you haven't been able to adjust that. So now you can actually change the font size to whatever you want within, quite a big range of numbers, which just gives you more formatting control to be able to display as many KPIs as you need within your report. Under Analytics, we have some updates to our key influencers visual that we have been previewing for a few months now. 3 updates to be precise. We have support for binning numeric columns that you're including in the bucket where we're analyzing and explaining by. We have formatting capabilities that we've added and support for mobile. So if you look at this key influencers visual I have here, I am analyzing my sale size, specifically what influences the sale size to be large, and I have 3 fields which I'm explaining by: class, color, and INSAT. Now INSAT is a numeric column in my data, and up until now the analysis type you could have gotten with INSAT or any numeric column would have been if something like if my INSAT increased, my likelihood for the sale size to be large increased or decreased. It was always the trend of it, the overall trend of that field that could affect the analysis. But now the key influences visual also can bin numeric columns in that explain by bucket as well. So in this case, that's what has happened for the INSAT field. The key influencers visual looked at the INSAT field and figured out what bins would be the most interesting. I didn't bin this column in my data. It did it on its own, and it found 4 different bins that were interesting: 1 or less, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, or more than 4 INSAT score. And based off of those bins, it found that if my INSAT score was 1 or less, I was 4.7 times more likely that my sale size was going to be large. So this new way that the key influencers visual can handle numeric columns can really help to find even more insights and dig a little deeper into what is influencing different things within my data. We also have more formatting controls for this visual as well. Up until now, the only thing you could do was change, say, the overall theme of your report, and it would pick up, say, the first and second data colors of your theme. But now you can adjust those colors as well. Under the analysis visual colors, that's where you'll find this primary color that's used for whatever bubble on the lollipop you have selected, and the associated bar for it. So you could change that to any color you want, like this blue, let's say. You could also change the primary text color, which is what shows up inside the bubble. You could also set the secondary color, which is for all the other lollipops. And I'm going to make those, say, this greenish color. And secondary text color is the color that shows on top of that. And then you can also change the background color and the font color for this this area with all the lollipops. So I can make that probably something quite ugly, like this light purple with a I don't know, white text on top. And you can also, through the drill colors card, also set the default color for all the other bars within the drill down visual. Set those to be orange. And you can also change the reference line. Let's put it to this reddish color. So you can see that you have a lot more flexibility on how this visual looks. Hopefully you use those capabilities a little better than I did and make something a lot better looking. But you do have these capabilities now to basically make the visual fit even more within the feel of your report. Lastly, like I mentioned earlier, the key influencers visual now works really well on mobile, so if you include this visual on your mobile report, you'll be able to really easily interact with it, select the different lollipops, see the visuals, just play with the visual the same way you would on, say, a desktop computer. We have two improvements under modeling, and the first is a way to disable auto date tables for all your new reports. Auto date tables is a feature of Power BI, whereas if you have, say, a date column within your data, we will automatically behind the scenes generate a date table for you that's hidden. And this enables us to do some smart auto time intelligence stuff within visuals, like when we create that automatic hierarchy for you in, say, the x-axis of a line chart. But some people have as part of their model date tables already, and so by us also automatically creating date tables, we're duplicating tables within your file, and that can increase the file size of your report. So if you don't want our automatic date tables for any of your new reports, we now have an option to turn it off. You'll find this option under the File menu, so File, Options and Settings, Options. Now we've always had a way to turn off date tables within a specific file under the current file data load, auto date time, this checkbox. But now we also have a checkbox under the global data load. And whenever you uncheck this option, any new files you create will not have the auto date time tables created for you. The second modeling feature is a small DAX improvement in that the all-selected DAX function has now been extended to support multiple arguments, just like the all function does. We have lots of updates under the visualization section, the first of which is a couple of updates to our ArcGIS maps for Power BI that is built by Esri. The first update for this visual is that there have been some major perf improvements to its initial load. So as a creator, whenever you insert the Esri visual and load the map, it should work a lot faster for you now. And the second update is that they've added a feature to not only tell you whenever something has failed to geocode, but to tell you specifically what values from your data failed geocoding. So if I go create an Esri map and I insert my country field, the map pulls up, see, quite fast, and it also failed to geocode one specific location from my data. And when I view the errors, I can see that it was from the country field, and it's a very misspelled version of Germany. And if I wanted to, I would see all of the errors in this list, and if I wanted to, I could choose to copy this to clipboard and then go back to my source to fix up my data, or maybe do it in Power Query if I rather do it there. So this should help, as you're, mapping your data. Geocoding is very important. It's, how you see the data on the map. So it's really important to know about these errors and to see what's wrong so you can go and fix it. Mapbox also has some improvements for their map as well. They've been working over the last few months on adding some major features to help with enterprises who want to deploy the Mapbox map across their entire organization. The first feature is more control over the map labels themselves. So like the Allentown, Philadelphia, all the labels that are, the map data labels. You're able to now control whether those show up above or below the data through the Viz settings card in the formatting pane. You'll see that there's a label position option there, and right now it's below data, and you can see all the cities that are underneath these extrusions is below the data. But if I change the settings to above, now I can see all the labels there. And so this gives me control to be able to decide, do I want to emphasize more my own data or the native mapping data? They've also added a legend to the map as well. You'll be able to turn on the legend for the choropleth, cluster, and circle layer types, and you'll be able to find the control for that under each of the cards. There'll be at the bottom a legend on-off toggle that you can use to turn the legend on and off, and this legend can make it easier for your end users to understand both the scale and the distribution of the data that you're mapping. The third feature they've added is an improvement to the gradient in their visual, so that you can now control the minimum, center, and maximum value for the colors that are being applied. And this helps to handle both whenever you have outliers and irregular distributions of your data, so that you don't have to worry about the gradient colors being heavily skewed towards one outlier and basically everything else looks the same color. So if that's the case of your data, you're able to change these settings from their default to handle that. Lastly, they've added support for raster tile source and WMS layer support. You'll be able to find that through the raster card, and when you turn that on, you'll be able to specify a URL, the tile size, the opacity, the min and max zoom, and all the things you can do for all the other layers, but now you can add your own data as well. So in my case, I've added a precipitation layer to this map, as you can see here in the purplish color. So if you're using the Mapbox custom visual, make sure to take advantage of all these new controls they've been adding to the visual. Next up is Val Cue, and Val Cue is a really interesting visual because it's actually more than a visual. Even though it appears as a custom visual in Power BI, it's really a whole platform geared towards helping executives and decision makers model, visualize, and analyze various different business scenarios, and then make effective decisions based off of their data. And so this visual could be used by anyone from a CFO to an analyst for a very wide variety of use cases. It could be used for planning, sales forecasting, headcount planning, even supply chain optimization. There's lots of different use cases for this visual. If we go over to a sample of the visual, you can see it looks like a tree visual, and there's a bunch of different nodes, and you can expand all the nodes through this little caret here, and when you click on it, it expands out. Clicking it again will close it, and you can expand any of the nodes all the way down to their lowest level. You can also simulate what-if scenarios by dragging this slider up or down, and as you can see, as I adjust the slider, I can see the formatting on this node changing from green to yellow to red based off of where I'm currently positioning my simulation. And when I let go, the whole tree will be adjusted to show how that change would impact all the way up, all the way back to the root of my tree. And I can keep doing that for a bunch of different values as well. So let's say plastics does a little bit better, and I can see how that combination affects the whole tree. And as I make these changes, you'll see that the simulation values are showing up at the top of the tree, so that even if I collapse certain nodes, I can always remember what my simulation is currently showing me. If I click on a node, I can also see more information about it. So for example, I clicked on core materials and I can see a definition and the calculation that are used for that node, and I can also see trends and see for each period what the trend is, what the simulation impact was versus the original performance. I see different benchmark data for me as well in the top right here, and then I see a breakdown of those changes as well, so I can see the original performance of my core materials, then how the carbon steel changes and plastic changes affect it to get to what my simulation value is. And I can get this information on any of the various nodes in my tree. For the nodes where I've done a simulation, I can also see, when I hover over it, this little pop-out button, and when I click on that, I can actually see a breakdown of what values per month my simulation is affecting, and generally it's going to be applied percentage-wise equally across all of the months that I'm showing in this tree. But I could choose to click on this little pencil icon, and then I could go in and I could adjust an individual month as well. If I think one month, for example, is going to be particularly bad and I want to see that impact, I can do that. This left pane here also has a lot of controls as well for anyone who's using the visual. I can see little sub trees, you could say, of my master tree and focus in on just one specific area. I can adjust the months within my simulation period. I can control how the values are displayed as well, for example, millions versus billions. I can see my key inputs and my KPIs here as well, even the constraints that might be applied to my tree. And I can control the visualization type, both the view, so for example this is the standard, I could switch to a minimal that's more compressed, and also the whole visual itself. If I don't want for a little bit to see the tree structure and I just want to see the data, I can switch over to the table view, and I get a matrix-like experience that has spark lines and colors to show me the breakdown of all the data. Another really cool feature of this visual is that it can show many different simulations. So my current simulation adjusts carbon, steel, and plastics. I can go back to my tree, and let's add a new scenario where instead of plastics, I adjust my automotive chassis value to something else. And then we'll add another one where on top of that, powertrain goes up. And then let's just add one more that removes the carbon steel. And so now I have 4 different scenarios, which I could give names, and I probably should if I was going to share this out. But I can also hit this button up here to compare all the different scenarios. And so I can see for all the KPIs, the key inputs, I can see what the effects of the scenario are and compare them across each of the different scenarios. And if one I'm like, oh, this one seems to be the worst, let's go back to that one, I can click on this go to scenario button and I'll land back on the tree selected to scenario 2. As an author, I also have a ton of formatting capabilities. I can control labels, I can control the colors, the appearance of the tree, various settings of the tree. I have tons of controls that can be reached through this pencil icon. So this whole time I've been exploring one of their samples. They actually have 4 different samples that you can choose from to just play with this visual. You don't have to have any data of your own, just purely playing with the data they give you. But if you did, once you're done playing with the samples and you're ready to start building your own, you're probably going to want to start with this create a simple dynamic model. It's the beginner version of the tree, and this will allow you to use your data, as you are used to using it within Power BI to build out a tree. And if you go through this model, you're going to start by adding two values to the value bucket. The first value you add to the bucket should be what you're measuring and simulating change on, and then the second value should be the benchmark you're going against. So I'll probably want to put, say, my sales amount in here, and probably my versus goals value in here. And then as I continue building up the tree, I'm going to put into the category bucket all the various categories I want this data to be broken down by, such as, category, region, sales rep, things like that. And then lastly, you're going to add a time period to that as well, so that you'll be able to have like a true trend line here instead of what you're seeing now. So once you have all those values, you get a true tree built out, very similar to what you saw from the samples. And as you're building out this tree, whether by looking at a sample or using the field well itself, you'll see that the tree has these nodes here, so you can see through the editing experience what the various nodes are, and see information about the nodes as well. There are a couple of other ways to build out a tree as well. The next one down is being able to create a new model from scratch, and that's actually, if we do that one, actually using this node panel to build out a tree. So you can click on one node, add a second node below it, edit that node through the edit node dialog to control all of the different aspects of that node one by hand, or you could use this quick edit option, which allows you for each of the nodes of the tree to set a formula to describe how to build up that node, set an aggregation method for it, a simulation method for it, add descriptions. Jumping back again to one of the samples. If you go into the quick edit, you can see here that a tree could be built out through this editor in really good detail. You can see the whole hierarchy here. Decide if it's going to be built off of a specific formula, or just adding or subtracting or multiplying various children of the node. If it should have a prefix or a suffix to it, its aggregation, if it's locked or not, everything that you could want to control about that node, you'll be able to do it in this way. And then lastly, the last mode is importing a model. And so you can either import it from a tree that you have previously built in Power BI and then export it. So if you want to move the data from a tree from one place to the other, you could do that with this import method. Or Val Cue also has an Excel template that looks a lot like the UI they had for creating the model from scratch that you could use. And if you're more comfortable in Excel, you can use this model that you can get from them, and sit with your end users, fill out the form to get the right configurations for the tree that they're going to want to see, and then from that Excel template you're able to get some information which you can then import here as well. So hopefully you can see through just my very quick overview for the scale of this feature is how powerful this visual can be, and how you can really use it to just start playing and simulating and modeling different scenarios within your data. And so if you are interested in this, make sure to go check out Val Cue's website as well, because they're building out a ton of content to help you be able to use these visuals as well. Next up is the Advanced Graph Visual by Zoom Charts. And this is an in-app purchase custom visual that allows you to create a sophisticated network visual. You can define and visualize one or more bidirectional links and format them as you choose. This can be really useful for analyzing money flow, managing and monitoring IT infrastructure, and analyzing social connections as well. If we look at the sample they provide, you can see it is in fact a network graph, and you can see in this table next to it what the form of the data is. So each node has its own ID, and that's going to go into the source node, and then there's another column that will reference all of the nodes that it connects to, and that's going to go into the target node columns. And then you can also have a value field as well that would control the number that's seen inside and the size of the bubble as well. Each of the bubbles can be moved around to adjust as well where they're positioned, and there's a forced feedback kind of layout, so each node can repulse out the other ones, and the links between them kind of act as springs. And Zoom Charts actually has a really cool algorithm that's going to result in a better looking and more beautiful layout compared to standard network graphs. You can zoom and fit to screen on here as well. You could choose to multi-select nodes to cross-highlight. You can even do things like rectangular selection to select multiple nodes to examine closer. And there's tons of customizations as well if you do choose to go the in-app purchase route. If you look at some of the other examples they have in the sample, and you go into the formatting pane for that visual, you can see, you have a lot of control over the nodes and how they look and the colors, and also how the links are formatted. Are they dashed or not dashed? Are they decorative of arrows or circles from either end? The width, the labels on the inside and the outside, you have full control over how it looks. You can see here that there's a bidirectional line in this case for this graph because the nodes point to each other. You can see here how you can give different labels on the graph, like giving names and specifying colors and numbers within the links between the nodes. You can even display images in the graph, which could be really helpful for going back to that social connections kind of data that you might want to show. So as you look at each of these different examples, you can see there's tons of flexibility: images, icons, conditional formatting, legends. You have full control over how this visual looks and tons of flexibility within it. The next visual, Create Controls Charts, is another in-app purchase visual, and this one's geared towards letting you analyze and track your processes and see whether they are in control. So this can help you predict the performance of your processes, and is commonly used as part of statistical process control and process improvement paradigms. Now you can see here's an example of it. It looks a lot like a line chart where you can focus in on certain areas and see where things stand out. The full version of it, where you're paying for the extra features, allows you to do things like small multiples on it. You get much more configuration over how the chart looks and how it's computed and everything. Tooltips, data selection capabilities, there's a ton of additional data control that you get if you choose to go the in-app purchase route for this visual. Our next visual, Walker's Animated Pictogram, is a really cute visual that lets you go beyond the simple bar charts and create these animated pictograms where there's little people, and as you cross highlight and they move in distributions, you're actually seeing people walk between the different bars of the charts. It's a really fun visual. It can liven up your reports, make it more animated, and maybe create a more of an emotional effect for the data. So this is the visual in action. You can see here each of these is one of the visuals, and there are people as the icon for each of the different bars, and whenever I click on one of them, I can see their person moved over. You can see people coming in from outside, filling in the gaps, it creates a really nice animated effect across the whole report. And so if you're going for more of an infographic style of a report, this visual could be really useful for you. The last visual on our list is the tree map bar chart by Mayo software. This allows you to display the breakdown of hierarchical data using color-coded proportional rectangles on top of a bar chart. So, for example, you could visualize your profit across several different categories at once, such as country, regions, and cities. With this visual, you're able, as you can see, each of the columns in this case is basically its own tree map. So I'm seeing at the bottom, I'm seeing the country, the legend is showing me the region, and then the city, and then the value itself is the profit. And so I'm able to show a lot of different categories within a pretty small space with this visual. And there are tons of formatting capabilities as well for this visual. I can switch between a bar and a column chart and change that orientation. I can control data labels, putting a total label on top, or including different label configurations within the visual. You can even show things like report page tooltips or drill through or bookmarks with this visual. You can cross highlight from the legend values, the axis, and individual bricks within the columns as well. Cross highlighting works there. There's tons of flexibility if you go into the formatting pane. You can see there's tons of controls. You can animate it even. So if you've been looking for a visual like this where you're combining a Cartesian chart with a tree map, this visual is a really good visual to try out. Under data connectivity, our first feature is that our Essbase Connector now supports native query whenever you're using import mode. So native queries can be specified as part of the Essbase Connector dialog, but you will need to specify your Essbase server and application name in order to execute the native queries. We also have added an Intune data warehouse connector. This connector allows you to connect to your Intune data warehouse to build reports and provide insights into your enterprise mobile environments with Power BI. Specifically, this connector connects to the version v1 of the data warehouse. We also added a Tenforce connector this month. Tenforce is a software solution able to provide an integrated overview of a company's operational reality on a global scale. It helps you smartly plan and track the management of your work, mitigate risk, ensure regulatory compliance, and augment your efficiency by quite a bit. And the Tenforce Smart List connector allows you to connect to your Tenforce installation, obviously, and consume its data. And then lastly, we also have a Roamler connector as well this month. Roamler is an online platform where qualified workers can get paid to perform curated or standardized tasks in retail, home installations, healthcare. This can vary from on-shelf availability audits to just installing smart thermostats. And this connector allows you to take that task data and visualize it in Power BI. Lastly, in our other bucket, we have an improvement to Power BI Desktop where we now automatically cancel queries whenever they're no longer needed. This is really important because it can really improve the performance of reports with slower models. There are 4 cases where we do cancel your queries all around times whenever those queries are obsolete. The first one is that whenever a visual generates a new query, say from cross-highlighting or a filter change, if it was already running a query for something else, those older queries get canceled because now they're obsolete. You don't want that data anymore, so we'll cancel it. We'll also cancel queries whenever you hide a visual that is in the process of running a query, either through the selection pane or bookmarking. And if you either change a page of a report or close a report, those are the third and fourth times that we will cancel any running queries. This should improve performance for your reports because now we're not spending time waiting for queries we don't need, and it should also help the load on your source as well. This is the first version of this feature, so there are a few scenarios where this isn't going to work. Specifically, this is for Power BI desktop, so it doesn't work in the Power BI service, report server are embedded yet. And also, given that it doesn't work in the Power BI service, it also doesn't work when using an on-premises data gateway as well to connect to your source. We do plan to invest further into these different query cancellation scenarios, so do stay tuned in future updates for more in this area. So that's it for this month. Let us know what you think about all of these great features in the comments, and we'll see you back here next month.